Hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great day. We got a Sportsbook Mastery about advanced operations, strategic and market domination. We're going to focus on Africa today. My name is Wayne Stevenson. I'm an experienced game professional. I've been in the industry for over 36 years, nearly 37 years actually, too long for some. Own my own companies, work for all the biggest companies in the UK, own my own companies. And I now own a US-based gambling company, but lots of experience. I'm going to enjoy this presentation and hopefully you'll learn a little bit, or you may not learn a little bit, but hopefully you'll enjoy it anyway. If anyone's got any questions, please, if you want to ask them at the end or drop your questions in the chat, that'll be fantastic as well. So hopefully you enjoy it, and let's get started. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus on Africa. Enormous continent, actually one of the fastest growing continents for gaming in the world. The only problem with it is it's a little bit, it struggles a little bit with the technology base and the structure, but we'll walk through it and hopefully you get some value. So it's predominantly sportsbook led, very little iGaming casino business being done legally and regulated in the states in the continent of Africa. It's all sportsbook led at this stage because the regulations just don't allow online gaming. South Africa will possibly be the first, but that's still to be finalised from a regulation point of view. It's mobile first, so in nearly every regulated jurisdiction, the main form of technology base is mobile first. And it's highly sensitive to the payment infrastructure and regulatory shifts. So this is where you need to partner with the right companies who have experience in operating in Africa, because that's critically important to the customer journey and the customer experience, which is obviously incredibly important to retain and get that repeat playback from that customer. If you can pay them out quickly and efficiently, they'll come back and spend that money with you again, which is really important. So while headline growth is strong across Africa, success in the region does depend heavily on jurisdiction selection. And we'll run through that as we go through this presentation. Local partnerships is also key to the success and market access. So let's look at the market structure and size. The African gambling ecosystem is dominated by sports betting, as I've mentioned, and it accounts for the majority of online gambling activity across the whole continent, whether that's regulated or unregulated in grey areas. It's driven by young sports engaged population as well. So your Gen Z, your millennials, incredibly important to engage with them in the right way. What's really important is smartphone penetration. There's everyone, because it's a younger generation, it's led by a younger generation, they've all got that smartphone in their pocket, which is obviously key to engage with. There's a widespread adoption of mobile money, particularly in East Africa. And again, it's using the Android Pay, which is more predominant than Apple Pay in Africa as well. So again, we just got to make sure that when you structure things and you get things set up as a business in Africa, you make sure you get that part done with the payment process for the mobile money. There's lower regulation barriers for sports betting versus online casino. As I mentioned, online casino it's just not regulated at the moment in any jurisdiction in Africa. And as I say, South Africa will be the first. So sports betting is the priority if you're looking to open up and operate in this continent. So the largest commercial markets by revenue and participation and engagement are, if you look at, we've broken it up into tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is South Africa's top, most mature regulated market, been regulated for a number of years, and they're still evolving that regulation market because they are, as I said, they are looking at online gaming for iGaming. And Nigeria is the largest by population and also for the numbers of people who actually partake in placing a bet. But again, it's nowhere near as mature as South Africa as a regulated market. In Kenya, it has the most customers betting on their mobile in Kenya, a really up and coming jurisdiction to look at. And tier 2 growth markets, Ghana, Tanzania and Uganda, all these are relatively newly regulated jurisdictions and are up and coming as we move forward. So the sponsor who is supporting the Gaming Operations Academy Masterclass today is Great Tech. Great Tech, they develop powerful B2B technology for global iGaming operators around the world. They work in a number of different jurisdictions: Africa, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. As I say, we're focused on Africa because of their experience in Africa, they can really help operators if you partner with them to help you get live in that marketplace. And we'll look at that in a second. But by focusing on reliable performance and flexible integrations, Greatech allows operators to enter new markets with confidence. And that's what I mentioned about the African market, because it's not easy to enter. You need a partner, especially a technology partner who understands that marketplace, and Greatech do that in very good way. Key position is AI-driven, plug-and-play sportsbook. It makes things very simple and easy and cost-efficient. And the capabilities include proprietary odds engine, managed trading risk, which is massively important. If you can't do that yourself, you get Greatech to help you with that. Bet builder, cash out player props. Again, evolution in new products is key to any successful operation for betting. And the new bet builder, obviously, on the soccer, which is the most predominant sport bet for place bets in Africa, is on soccer or football as we know it. And again, the bet builder is an incredibly high margin product for you to work with. And real-time personalization, which is key to engage with the customer in the right way. And this is the most important part with Africa in mind, is the iframe API, or full platform deployment. The experience Greatech have in Africa will really help you to get live in the easiest way possible. And the iframe is the easiest way possible through their API. And as I mentioned there, Greatech can also run the trading risk under a shared responsibility model. And this is really important to get that balance right. So let's look at each market in a more detailed way. So we'd look at Nigeria. This is the largest and most participant from a customer point of view. You can see here they've got some of the biggest names in gambling around the world. You've got your Betway, your 1xBet, and Bet365. They're some of the biggest international operators from around the world who have entered the Nigerian market. The more local operators are Bet9, BetKing, NairaBet, and SportyBet. The great thing about Nigeria, because it's so predominant with the highest number of people betting, the local aspect is as competitive as the international market. So that's really, really interesting to understand, that you can see local operators can actually stand their ground and trade effectively and have got good market share against the big boys, which I think, again, it shows you that if you understand your marketplace and understand exactly what your competitors are doing, which is key in the competition element, then you can trade really well against some of these bigger operators, even though you may not have the deepest pockets in the world where you can compete from a marketing point of view, but you can still do it effectively if you're really clever and you understand the marketplace. South Africa, as I mentioned, most mature market. Hollywood Bets are incredibly successful in South Africa, do lots of sponsorship for different sports in that jurisdiction. NairaBet, the local operator, again, do very well. But you still got those big boys there, the Betway, the 1xBet, and the Bet365. You can see here that the two biggest markets, Nigeria and South Africa, that's being targeted by three of the most successful global operators. But you need to be, if you're trading from a lower level, you need to be really competitive and get a real understanding of the marketplace before you enter and start competing against these big operators. Kenya, an up-and-coming market. SportPays are there, Betika, SportyBet, they're the local operators. And then you got your Betway, your 1xBet. No Bet365 here, as you can see. They whether that's on their market, whether that's on their agenda to enter, I don't know that. But again, you can see there that you still get your 1xBet and your Betway, are two big African operators. And then you get the 22Bet and BetWinner, again, some smaller operators. But you can see there that it is a little bit easy to enter the Kenyan market compared to other markets. And I think that's why you're going to get a lot more localized, lower end. And not being disrespected there, when I say lower end, I don't mean that disparagingly, but they're not big global operators like your 1xBet and your 20 and your Betway and your Bet365. Ghana's an interesting market. You got Betika, SportyBet are there as well. They're really active in Africa, as you can see. And then you got a subsidiary of the Betway group, Betway Ghana, and 1xBet are still there. You've got a couple of entrants that I'm really not sure I know much about, I'll be honest with you, but it's MotarBet and Premier Bet I know a little bit about. But again, these smaller operators are there to compete against the bigger operators. And we've got Tanzania and Uganda. Again, SportPays are there, Betway are there. Betway are actually in every marketplace here, as you can see, Premier Bet as well. But just to summarise, when you enter a marketplace, you really want to look and get an understanding and do your homework and your examination of each market that you're looking to enter. There's lots of information online that you can do. You want to get in touch with the regulators, because they have lots of information as well, which will help you out. And each regulator have their own rules and regulations as well, which I'll come to. But really take an understanding of that marketplace, your market, who you want to target as a customer. As I mentioned, most of Africa is the younger generation, so you've got to make sure that if you're going to the market with a mobile app, for example, you've got to make sure that mobile app is as good as it can be before you go live. So even if you're going to go for an MVP, make sure that MVP is good enough, because first impressions count, and if you cannot create a good first impression, you'll lose that customer. They'll just go back to the usual suspects who they have an account with already. So that's some things there to take out, and obviously ask questions at the end if you've got anything you want to ask. Estimated revenues. Again, you can see there the two biggest marketplaces are South Africa and Nigeria. South Africa's at an estimated sportsbook only, obviously no online iGaming in any of these marketplaces through regulated structure. But you can see that $2.6 billion is the market estimation for South Africa, and that's significant when you consider there's only about 14 operators trading in South Africa with significance. That's a nice market share that you can have to create a lovely bottom line profit in your business. Nigeria, obviously the largest, 3 billion is the estimated GGR market in that jurisdiction. And again, you can run down then through the smaller up and coming marketplaces where you got Kenya 750 million, Ghana 400 million, Tanzania 350 million, and Uganda 250 million. And you can see why there's at the lower end there's less competition, because there's less of a pie for people to take the market share from. So that's significant where you probably don't. That's probably why you're not seeing Bet365 in Tanzania and Uganda, because it's probably not a big enough market for them to invest in. They are trading in Ghana, Nigeria, and obviously South Africa. The taxation landscape. Again, if you're looking to choose any marketplace to open up a new business in, then you need to look at all these different factors. Taxation is one of the biggest, because obviously that's a fixed cost. It's one of the things that affects your bottom line profit. So the gaming taxation across Africa, it varies widely, but unfortunately, generally, it's on a trending upward base where taxes are increasing. So Kenya's currently 15%, Ghana 20%, Tanzania 25%, Rwanda 40%. Nigeria is really competitive at 11%, and South Africa, because of the provincial tax structure, you've got 6% to 15%, and that depends on which products you're trading off. Each product has a different taxation parameter in there. But you can see Rwanda, that's going to turn people away when operators see that there's a 40% tax rate in Rwanda. That's just a turn off for me. It's not a market that I would certainly personally target if I was opening up a business in one of these jurisdictions. The norm is normally between 15 and 25%. That's the norm globally. Between different places, you do have the exception in some different countries. New York, for example, in the States is 51%, which is one of the highest in the world. And it only attracts the companies with operating, an enormous operating budget to be able to sustain that taxation. But any of these are pretty competitive, and you can trade under this regime for between 15 and 25% quite comfortably if you get your efficient operating structure in place. And then you can see there's some additional gross gaming revenue taxes in a lot of jurisdictions, which also apply, and that can corporate income tax, typically between 25 and 30%, withholding tax on player winnings, which is interesting, and excise duty on stakes or deposits in some markets as well. So again, if you're looking at each jurisdiction on its own merits, you've got to get all your information, because you don't want any surprises that when you do your modelling and your financial forecasts, you then look at the fact that, I wasn't aware there was a corporate income tax of 30%, which you didn't factor into your business model, because that will just crucify your whole financial forecast. So if we look at a regulatory environment, so Africa does not operate as a harmonized regulatory region. It's a patchwork of different jurisdictions. So you've got your mature licensing regimes, you've got your South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, and Tanzania. And then you've got your fragmented or evolving frameworks. What I mean by that is that Nigeria keeps changing their regulation parameters, as do Uganda. the tax rate in Nigeria is looking to be moved, is to be increased again. Currently it's 11%, but they are looking to increase it. And that's one of them unknowns where if you're modeling and you want to do your financial forecasts, whether you invest in capital for to set up a business to move into Africa, you need stability. And unfortunately, in a fragmented and evolving framework, you don't get that. Whereas your mature licensing regimes, they're more stable. When you're doing your forecasts, you got more of a stable footing, and you know that those numbers that you're producing are going to be they're going to be far accurate than a fragmented where you got a changing framework. So concessions and monopoly-led markets, I've not really concentrated on them because you really struggle to enter those markets. Are you able to just finish? Hopefully.
I think the microphone is a bit off a little bit. Can you hear me, Wayne? Can you hear me?
Adam, can you hear me?
Yep, that's better.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep, can hear you now. Yep. We just missed the last bit that you just mentioned, like literally the last sort of seconds.
Brilliant. Let me just go back to that slide. Hang on a second. Apologies, everybody. Glitches. So let me just recap on this slide. If we steer clear of the monopoly-led markets, and obviously the enforcement-driven or restricted environments, they are key. Don't waste your time and money entering those markets. They're not regulated, and if you want to trade in grey or black areas, you don't do it through a regulated structure, obviously. And if you look at regulatory trends across most African jurisdictions, what we're seeing is higher effective tax rates. As I mentioned, unfortunately, Nigeria, 11% the lowest, but they're looking to increase theirs. We've got greater transactional level reporting, which is good. Tighter advertising controls, again, that can restrict how you want to promote and engage with the consumer and the customer. And again, you just need to keep doing your homework on the marketplace and the regulators. It's not just about understanding the levels of demand in each marketplace, but you got to look at exactly the regulatory environment, because they could restrict yours or put a stranglehold on your plans, how you want to promote the business. And increased responsible gambling oversight. Again, this isn't a bad thing, unless it's not consistent. If it's not consistent, then it can strangle your business. If you look at what's happening in the UK very quickly, the wealth controls, checking on people's bank accounts, things like that, it's just a turn off, and it's sending people offshore into grey markets, which is not good at all from a regulated marketing standpoint. Anyone who wants to trade grey, then obviously you can go ahead and do that, and just do that workaround from the regulated process. Strong AML and payment visibility requirements. Again, these aren't bad things in a business. You want to make sure that your money laundering processes are in place anyway from a regulatory point of view, and obviously any sort of improvements in payment efficiency back to the customers is really, really important. So you're going to see a lot of these trends starting to come in, where the regulators are starting to look at their own house and getting things in order and starting to do things in a more efficient way themselves. So operators should just expect an ongoing regulatory and tax volatility, particularly in East Africa, which is where you've got your Egypts, etc., and your Ethiopia. So hopefully that's been helpful. If anyone's got any questions, please ask away, or if we've got anything in the chat, Adam.
Yeah,
that we
that's a
can look
really
at.
informative session there around Africa, and obviously there's a lot of shifting sands around the rest of the world. I know I'm sort of putting you on the spot here a little bit, but what do you think the risks and opportunities are in Europe and the UK right now? Obviously, I treat sort of Europe and the UK different now since Brexit and whatever, right? And I know that you're up to some quite sexy stuff over in the US, which you can and can't talk about, no doubt. But, you know, what are the risks and sort of opportunities over in the US, you know, that you've got to hand? I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but I know you've got plenty of tools in your saddlebag there and information.
Yeah, no. So Europe, again, it's an ever-changing state of affairs. The UK with their wealth checks and the increased taxation up to 40% is going to be a killer. And again, what that does, it just means that unfortunately the low-lying fruit, as I call them in this industry, where you've got the lower-end operator who doesn't have the budgets as the big operators do, then they're just going to struggle when that tax hike comes in next April in the UK. There's going to be a real shift, and the only winner there is the tax man. Even then, in the UK, that's not going to be exactly true, because customers are leaving the UK and going offshore, betting in grey areas, because there's no wealth checks in grey markets. So, which is a shame. The Treasury think they want all that taxation coming back to them, and it's not going to happen. They're going to lose it to offshore operators. There's a lot to be learned from the UK Gambling Commission and how they're operating. But the wealth checks are a killer. The last thing a customer needs is to be given any sort of, any sort of checks on them financially. Anyone who wants to access their bank accounts, it's just a no-no. You just don't want that in a regulated operations. So what you need to look at there is, these regulators need to look at where the taxation sits, get that balance right. And as I say, the sweet spot is be sort of 15% to 25%. That seems to be exactly where the sweet spot is. As you mentioned, Adam, I'm involved in a business in the US, which is a brand new business. We're just entering Maryland, and when I mentioned that you need to be clever with your foundation of the business, and when you look at and you do your homework on the marketplaces, we looked at a number of different examples of different states that we wanted to enter into. And we looked at different factors like market access, the ease of market access. What partners do you need to partner with to gain market access? What's the cost of that partnership? You then look at your banking fees, your application fees. Pennsylvania, for example, is a $10 million application fee. That's not for me. We've entered Maryland, where it's a couple of $100,000. That's still not cheap. But when you consider and you reflect against a licensing regime of $10 million just to apply for a license, again, it's very restrictive. So some of these regulators just need to get that balance right. And in Africa, to be fair to them, it's a jurisdiction where they're trying to get it right, especially up against demanding economic times in a lot of jurisdictions in Africa. But Europe's, again, you look at the tax hike in Holland, it's killed that marketplace. That was a new regulated market, and it went live three and a half years ago, and the regulators have killed it, which is a shame, because there's a population of 17 million in Holland, and they had a strong online casino business, and they've just killed it. The regulators are killing it. They're just sending people offshore again. So that's what we're seeing in different parts of the world, Adam. There's lots going on, but regulation can be a killer as well as an asset. Is there
any market in Europe which is green for opportunity, do you think, when it comes to sports betting?
An interesting one going forward is Poland. It's a market I'm actually looking at myself, simply because at the moment it looks like the regulators are going to relax a lot of things in Poland, which could make it really interesting later in 2026. So that's one you should definitely keep an eye on if you're thinking of moving into different parts of Europe. And again, you got to look at in each jurisdiction, you got to look at which products there's a demand for in a lot of these countries and a lot of these jurisdictions. So, for example, in Eastern Europe, horse racing is just a no-no. It's just not popular. So don't focus your product base on things like horse racing in Eastern Europe. Whereas in Western Europe, horse racing is a significant part of the business. And again, when you're entering, as an operator, when you're entering jurisdictions, you really need to look at All those different small factors which you should focus on in your business. So don't focus on horse racing if you're going to enter Romania, for example, or Poland. It's just even Holland. It's just not popular in Holland. So again, you just really need to make sure you do your homework in everything you look at when you're setting up a business in a new jurisdiction.
We've got a couple of questions here. The first one, and if anybody else has got any questions, please feel free to shout out or pop them in the chat, and we'll get round to them. So we've got here the first question is what do you think the GGR percentage is in the UK and African market? I don't know whether we need to expand on that question, but yeah. So what do you think the GGR percentage is in the UK and African market?
Well, the percentage in the UK ranges anything between, and it all, that answer all depends on how aggressive you are and how much you want to give away in your offers and your product range giving back to the customer. Because each offer that you give away, or free bet you give away, or if you want to retain customers, you've got to create loyalty in that engagement with the customer. Again, everything costs money in a business. So, and each one of them will have an impact on your percentage GGR and it's all about how you want to trade. So, if you're going to give a €100, €200, or a $500 free bet away on to acquire a customer, again, that's an expense in a business. So that is going to affect the GGR percentage of how you trade in that jurisdiction. On average, it ranges in the UK between anything from about 8% to 13% online. Retail is different in the UK. That's anything between 15 and 22%. And again, it depends how you want to trade. But certainly products like Bet Builder, which is a high margin product, anything between 28 and 32% is made off a Bet Builder on football, for example. Again, you want to structure your business in a way that you want to focus and market and promote those high margin products more than anything. And the Bet Builder for the Gen Z and millennials, which is the younger generation, certainly predominant in jurisdictions like South Africa, for example, you want to be promoting everything about that Bet Builder offering because it's high margin. And if listen, it works both ways. If you can't win all the time, you do have to let the customers win every now and again. So if they win a nice big bet off the Bet Builder, you can promote everything about that big bet, about that player winning that big bet, and that just brings people back into the business. Certainly in Africa, the GGR is volatile compared from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That's a difficult one, but again, it normally varies anything between sort of 5 and 11% online in most jurisdictions. In the US, it ranges between 9 and sort of 13% in most states, except for New York, because New York's got a 51% tax rate. The operators actually don't give away as much when they're trading in those jurisdictions with a higher tax rate because they can't afford it. So you need to adapt to each marketplace as well and create that balance.
That's a great answer. And then we've got a question in from Stuart over at Booming Games. So what are the innovative products that are hitting the markets globally? What are you seeing out there at the minute that's quite innovating and sexy, that's new and different, that's hitting the market? Or what are people, what are people finding interesting and using and drifting towards?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So thanks for that one. Now, again, each marketplace has different demands and products which work. Some work and some actually don't work. But what you're now seeing is the evolution of AI products in the business, which creates efficiency in how you operate in your business. So what I mean by that is that you can create micro markets which aren't available at the moment through AI because a human being cannot react as quick as the AI does. So, for example, if you look at NBA basketball, there's brand new products coming into the marketplace where the AI will create brand new in-running markets which human beings can't build in time. So it analyzes the first quarter in an NBA match, for example, and then what it will do, it will then create all the markets, the rebound markets, the score markets, the player points markets, player props. It'll do all that within seconds, ready for quarter two. And then as quarter two is being played and there's a rebound or a block or a score, it will just change those markets and the pricing and trading on those markets within milliseconds. they've never been seen before, because human beings can't produce those markets, efficiently and quickly enough. So certainly the AI is going to be a big player in the next couple of years in evolving different types of betting. Certainly in play betting is going to be key. The micro markets are going to be key, where you can actually break down different sections of an event into new betting markets. So we're seeing technology like that being introduced. I'm introducing that to my business in the US, which I think is really important to be able to compete with different operators, obviously, because if you can get to market first with some of these new opportunities, then customers will be talking about your business instead of the competitor's business. But certainly AI is going to be a big one, Adam, in the next sort of 2-3 years.
Well, and is there any sort of any information, anything sexy coming out of sort of Asia or LATAM at the minute that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, again, I mean, if you look at Brazil, which is obviously one of the biggest newly regulated markets, and I know, Adam, you know Brazil really, really well. Football is the holy grail in Brazil. So if you can get that product right in Latin America, you're going the right way with your business straight away. But again, when you look at these football markets, it's about player retention. So operators now are starting to use free-to-play games, free entry, where you can spin a wheel and you get rewarded if you get the right answer and things like that. All these retention products are critically important, certainly in places like LATAM, where it's ultra competitive, where customers, because of the economy as well, the customers don't have as much money in the pocket to bet with. Again, that's key. Then you really want to retain that customer, and free to play games and products are immensely important in certainly in Latin America. Asia is a bit different because you've got a bigger stake. You've got bigger pockets from the customers in Asia. So the free to play opportunities out there to retain customers is probably less prevalent than they are in lower end economies like your Latin Americas, and that's not being disparaging. It's just how economies are different around the world. But yeah, again, you're looking at Asia. You just got to focus on the higher staking customer, the VIP, how you can model your business to cater for the demands of the VIP in Asia is key. Horse racing is enormous in Asia as well, as we know. So again, you can focus on new products which are being created, and again, AI are going that way for horse racing as well. You can create a 2 furlong race within a mile race, for example, or 400 meters within a 1600 meter race if you're in metric. Again, the AI can create those in-running markets for horse racing, which is going to be big in Asia going forward as well, in those big pool betting markets.
We've got a question here from Varinia Espinosa. This is a Latam and Caribbean question around soccer, which is a good one. So how would you gain momentum? This comes along. This question always comes along in sports betting, right? About how would you gain momentum and traction for the World Cup soccer specifically, obviously, for the Latin and Caribbean markets.
Well, obviously focus on the teams which are in your jurisdiction and area, where your customers are going to have the most interest in. So certainly with the World Cup, evolve into more football teams with more teams involved, it just opens up opportunity after opportunity. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of companies this year with no big summer tournament involved in their numbers, and their numbers are pretty static year on year. So the importance of having a summer event like a World Cup is incredibly important to all operators, because you've got summer months where there's certainly no football. In Europe, for example, your business can drop anything up to 20% through that summer month. So to have a big tournament at the World Cup, but you target the matches, you look at the schedule, you target the matches, you look at the time zone differences as well to where the World Cup match is being played in the US. What time do they kick off in your jurisdiction? So again, you got to make sure you plan properly for an event like this. One of the biggest successes from a few years ago was we used a business. I had a business in 2022 for the last World Cup where we targeted the Gen Z and millennials with a free-to-play, like a fantasy football game, and it was incredibly successful. And what we did there, because it started from game one, match one, and then finished in the final. As soon as you got everyone entered before match one, they had an engagement throughout the whole tournament, which was incredibly important for retention and keeping that customer to keep coming back to you. And then you can promote to that customer because you got them involved. You know what teams they're betting on as they go through the tournament. And again, it's just understanding that data, that customer data, which is incredibly important for not just events like the World Cup, but just your week to week product range of how you want to promote and engage with your customer. But we use some really good fantasy free to play type games, football games, to engage with the customer for the last World Cup, and we'll be looking to do the same again in America for this World Cup. But I certainly just make sure you understand your own customer base, the information on your customers as to if you've got historic data on them, what teams did they bet in the last World Cup, and promote those same teams and betting products back to them again. You know, creating an attraction with them. That's really key. But certainly, you got an opportunity, a one-off opportunity for 4 or 5 weeks in the summer this year. Plan ahead and make sure that you can look at how you really want to promote and what your budget can be. Don't forget your budget is incredibly important to any business, but if you can allocate a budget separate in 2026 to the World Cup, you should definitely be doing that and promoting it in the right way, in the right marketplace.
Have you noticed anything of any interest, any interesting trends around the Winter Olympics, Wayne? I know that the Olympics can always be a bit of a pain in the arse when it comes to sports betting, because we don't see the uptrends as a lot of people outside the industry would expect, right? So has there been any interesting trends off the current Winter Olympics, or has it been the same as it's always been?
It's a very difficult sport. One, to price up because of the data feeds, Adam. So most markets you have to have a data feed. So unless you can find a data feed that provides you with a snowboarding market with all the assets you need in that data feed through the API, it's very difficult. You can't manually create markets like you did 30 years ago before all the automatic data feeds were in. It just limits the business. So it's a very difficult event to really. I call it, when you want to sweat the asset and get as much out of it as you can. It's very difficult to do that with the Winter Olympics. And again, it's the knowledge base of customers. I mean, apart from a couple of UK skiers and bobsleighers, skeleton people, I don't know any of the UK team to enter the UK. They're entering the Winter Olympics from a UK perspective. And I'm sure that customer education is key to getting any sort of betting market popular, and I think that's the biggest challenge is the understanding of the customers as to who the superstars are in Winter Olympics. I just don't know them, and I apart from owning my own business, I also do gamble as well personally to try and make some money. So I think that's the biggest challenge, Adam, is that customer base, that customer education, information, and also the structure of the data feed. So I can't see the Winter Olympics being a popular betting medium for a long time to come, if I'm honest, unfortunately.
Thanks for that, Wayne. Now, if anybody's got any more questions over the next couple of minutes, feel free to drop them in the discussion panel there on your right-hand side. Wayne, you've got a masterclass for us coming up. I know that we're putting some of the content together, an advanced sportsbook masterclass. What sort of key areas are we going to deep dive in with that masterclass over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, one of my biggest experiences is I've set up 4 gambling companies over the last sort of 15, 16 years. So what I'd like people to get some value out of along with that masterclass is that we can look at the pros and cons, the challenges of setting up a brand new gambling business, which is important. If you can get that foundation right, it just gives you a real good standing to create success. How to raise capital for that new business as well is key. I've done a lot of that over the years, but should be concentrating a little bit of that, which I think is important. M&A as well. If you're a trading operator and you want to expand into different areas, how would you look at an M&A opportunity, which is merger and acquisitions? How would you look at doing that? It's normally done by some of the biggest operators in the world. You see some big M&As happening in the last few years, but anyone can do that. At a low level, you can do that. You don't need to be a big company to do that. But again, we can look at things like that going forward. and obviously we can concentrate and do more of a deep dive into the competition, how you analyze competition, some of the best tools you need in your business to analyze the competition, and customer data as well. Looking at your own customer data is so important to a successful business. A lot of people actually, when they're operating, they don't look at the competition enough, or what the markets are doing in their jurisdiction, or their the demands of the marketplace. So we can focus on that as well. Focus on the areas which aren't normally looked at, Adam. So everyone can look at your product range, what's popular, what's not popular for customers in different jurisdictions. But we want to try and add value to people where they come in to this masterclass in April, where we can really show them some of the different aspects of, from start to finish. Where do you go to start a business up? How do you start a business up? How do you license that? What structure of an operational team do you need in your business? Things like that, which I think, from a gaming operator, all these things are so difficult to execute in the right way. So I think any advice that the guys out there, if they're going to join, they can get from that. And a trading business is key. Anyone can acquire customers at a cost. So I think we should be focusing again on that player attainment in a lot more detail. Obviously, we only had an hour today, but we got a longer time span where we can really focus on player retention and the structures of some of the tools that you can put into your business to try and get that customer back, because ultimately that's the success of the business. If you can keep that customer and get them using your app or your website instead of the competition, then you're going the right way, and you got a good chance of being successful. So certainly a number of things like that, Adam, would be key in the discussion, I think.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for turning up today. It's been a great session. The recording of this session will be available over the next couple of minutes for you to forward on to your colleagues and team members and network. Like, as you know, it's a free session, this one. Hope you've got a lot out of it. We'll also send over in the next 24 hours a little certificate, attendance certificate, which is for you for attending this session, and you can share that on LinkedIn and things like that. We'll also drop you links and information regarding the masterclass and some of the other stuff that we've got happening. They're CPD accredited by the CPD Standards Office, so it's something you can take with you on your career moving forward. Thank you, Wayne, for your time today. Much appreciated. I've learned a lot. A really good deep dive session there, even though it was a quick session, as we know. This one's only an hour on Africa. Some interesting stats and statistics there, as well as your overview of what you see is happening over different territories and stuff around the world.
My pleasure, Adam, and I hope everyone enjoyed it and maybe got a bit of value out of it, which is obviously what these events are all about.
Where will everybody see you in physically, Wayne? When's the next event? Where are you going to be popping up? Will it be Portugal? Will it be something else a little bit sooner? Where you go down to Africa, maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to I'm doing as I mentioned, a lot in America, so I'm actually flying out to San Diego for the Indian Gaming Conference. That's my next big conference. Obviously I was at ICE in Barcelona. We met there, Adam, briefly, but yeah, I'll be doing all the usual suspects, all the big events, but my next one's going to be San Diego. So yeah, I was hoping to try and get to the next .io event in New York, but I'm going to have to miss that one. Got too much on. So, but yeah, San Diego is next for me.
Perfect. Well, look, thanks a lot, Wayne, and thank you everybody for joining this session. Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.